Now we're on Daf Nunam in Beis, and we're quoting a brisa that seems to indicate that once the stones from Marcolis were used for paving highways, that constitutes bittul, and you're allowed to benefit from those highways. But that's because it was the idol worship himself who took the stones from the Marcolis, and one idol worshiper could be mavatel and nullify the Avoda Zara of another non-Jewish idolater. But Yisrael she'evi avonim ben Marcolis, if a Jew would take the stones from the Marcolis and use it to pave a highway, asuros, you're not allowed to benefit from because these are stones that were worshipped. And there's no bittul when a Yisrael is mavatal. There's no such thing as bittul. However, the Gemara is going to say that this price is very difficult. And the Gemara is going to go through various possibilities as to what was exactly the difficulty of the brisa. But for less nagar v'lo bar nag, no scholar or son of a scholar could interpret this brisa. And Omer Rav Sheshes, ano lo nagar v'ano lo bar nargo, ano upriktoi, I will take a shot at it and interpret this brisa, despite the fact that I'm not the greatest scholar. Because my kushale, what was the difficulty inherent in this brisa? And the answer is the Rav Gidl. So let's go back for a moment to Rav Gidl. And Rav Gidl said, "Minayin l'tikrovas avodas k'chom she'ena b'teila olomis." And the answer is Be'ina came to Pnim Veleka. Says Rav Sheshes, this is not a contradiction to Rav Gidl, who says that Tikrovas Avodas Kacham Ham L'B'Teilu Olam, you can't do bittul. Here, we're not talking about a service of the idolaters that's similar in any way, shape, or form to the service of the Beis Hamikdash. Bifnim. We don't throw stones. Now, Amar Rav Yossi bar Abba Ikla Rabba bar Yirmiyah le Asrin. Rabba came to that place. The also the Isim Asisi, he brought a price. Okay, so now Rabbosai, we begin a brand new sugi. And in a certain sense, we're now shifting from Masechta Avodah Zara to Masechta Moed Katan. And half of Moed Katan is dedicated to the issues of what constitutes a prohibited malacha on Shvius and a prohibited malacha during Chol HaMoed. For example, Masliin umizamin b'Shvius. During the 7th year, we're allowed to get rid of worms from the tree in order to save the tree. And that's called masliin. Masliin means we get rid of the worms. What's mizamin? Mizamin apparently is some sort of chemical. Again, believe it or not, it's made of dung, apparently. Anyway, so some portion of the tree was diseased, and the inside kishkis of the tree was exposed, the bark was removed, and now you have to sort of treat the tree. How do you treat it? Number one, you put this rancid, maybe it's made of dung, as we say, some sort of chemical fizz, and then we cover the tree with a bandage, actually. And this is going to prevent the tree from drying up and dying. However, even though we allow that during Shvius, ein masliim azim b'moed. On Chol HaMoed, we don't allow this. And the Gemara is going to tell us that on Chol HaMoed, it's not enough to tell me that, well, what you're doing is just to save the tree. We would have thought that would be enough to permit it even on Chol HaMoed, but rather on Chol Hamoed, we don't want you to get preoccupied and dedicated to malacha that's going to uh, be Mesiach Datcha from Simchas Yontif. Kan v'kan, but there are other malachas that are prohibited even during Shvius. And what's that? Ein megazmin. So gizum is what we call pruning, otherwise known as zomer. V'sachin shemen legazum. However, if you already pruned the tree and the branches of the tree, now you want to strengthen the tree by smearing oil on the tree. That's mutar bein b'moed bein b'shvius. That's not considered a tircha yisera. That's not a great encompassing laborious malach. The less nagar v'lo bar nagar the praktik. There's some problem in this brisa that I just presented from Rabbah, and no scholar could resolve this brisa. Omar Avina, again, I know lo nagar, I know v'lo bar nagar. I'm not a scholar or the son of a scholar for Akinile, but I can interpret this brisa. But first, let me tell you what was difficult about this brisa. Ma kokashale. If you're telling me how could you differentiate between Moed, meaning Chol Moed, and Shvius, the seventh year, and you told me that Masliin umezamin b'Shvius ve'ein Masliin umezamin b'Moed, what are you talking about? Maishna Shvius Tishori Maishna Moed. So you're asking me. Nobody can interpret this price and make sense out of it to differentiate between Chol Hamoed and Shvius. And the answer is me dummy. There's a whole new element that enters into the equation with regard to Chol Hamoed. It doesn't have any application in Shvius. Shvius, Malacha Asar Achmana. In the case of Shvius, the Torah prohibits something which is going to create a tree. But you want to save a tree from disaster, then that's mutar on Shvius, even if it takes a lot of work and a lot of labor. It's labor intensive. But on Moed, afilu tirchanami oser. There's another oser on Moed, not just malacha. Even if it's not a malacha to positively create the tree or give life to the tree, but still there's another oser, and that is tircha. And these actions of gozem, what was it called? Mizamin or maslian, and they're very labor intensive. But what was the difficulty in the brisa? Zium agizum kokashale. How is it that you prohibit pruning the tree, and that we said was prohibited, right? Bein b'moed bein b'shvius, and yet zihum, right, where you try to save the tree by giving it that, chemical, what's it called? Life-saving process, and that's mutter. Me dummy, I don't get it. That's not a kasha. Ziyum oki ilan v'shari, ziyum avrui ilan v'shari. You want to know what malach is prohibited on Shvius and on Chol Hamoed? It all depends upon whether or not you're giving new energy into the tree or you're just simply saving the tree from disaster. And herein lies the difference between ziyum and gizum. Right, gizum is something that you prune a tree and it grows faster and faster and greater. But ziyum means that you apply this, I call a veterinarian, I don't know what a veterinarian for trees are, but this kind of process to save the tree from disaster. And that's permitted. No, I'll tell you, Ravina, what the difficulty is. Elazim azim kokashale. The katani. Here our Brisa says, Masliyim mizame b'shvius. that you're allowed during Shvius to do this mazhimim, right? Ziyum, which we said was again the application of that drug in order to save the tree. And yet, Ramini, I'll quote to you another brisa that says mazhimim es hanetios, the karchim osam, the kotmin osam, the osam batim, umashkin osam ad Rosh Hashanah. That any of the following activities are mutter in the sixth, right? We have something called Tosefet Shvi'it. So the sixth, towards the end of the sixth year, we have certain Isurim, let's say El before Shvi'is until Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is already Shvi'is. And we're going to allow you to apply that which you have to apply to save the tree in this medical procedure for the tree. And we're going to wrap it, and we're allowed to put ashes on it, and you could create some sort of structure of a shelter around it, and you could water it. All this is okay at Rosh Hashanah. At Rosh Hashanah in Mishvius Lo. So you see clearly that when we get to the year Shvius, then this activity called Mizamim is prohibited. And the Gemara says, you know what? There's no steer. Why Dilma Kirav Ukva Barcham? Diamar Rav Ukva Barchama Trey Kashkushe Hava. So now we're talking about Harisha, which in English is called hoeing. And Chad Lavure Ilana V'Yasur, Chad Lastume Pile V'Shari. So that what you do in order to give extra strength and extra productivity to a tree, that is prohibited. But that which is just to cover the cracks in the roots to prevent the tree from being destroyed, that's permissible. In the first type of hoeing, the person pierces the ground and removes excess dirt around the tree. This is like an agricultural procedure in order to strengthen the tree. That's prohibited. But the second type of hoeing is to just sustain the tree, maintain its existence by preventing the roots from drying out and covering the cracks in the roots. Good. So that's the statement of Rav Ukva Barcham. And now we're going to use that distinction and plug it in here. Hachanami here too. Trezi Amume Hava. Sometimes Ume is mutter, and sometimes it's also Chad Lukume Ila V'Shari. If it's to save the tree from being destroyed, that's okay. Chad Lavruye Ilana V'Yasur. If you're giving the tree new life and strength in order to project it to maximize its capacity of productivity, that is prohibited. The Ella, so now we finally get down to what the kasha is all about. Sicha kakashale. Right, we spoke about smearing oil on a tree. And we said that it's mutter both during Shemitah and during Chol HaMoed. The Ketani, it says, Sachin Shemel Gozim Bein B'Moed Bein B'Shvius. Right, after you prune the tree, if now you just want to pour the oil on the tree in order to prevent the tree from disintegrating, it's mutter here and there, reminu, but we have a price. Sachin es apagin. Again, we're going to have the same diuk of Ad Rosh Hashanah. We're in the 6th year. And we're allowed to do the smearing of the oil on figs. They have these pagim. Pagim are figs before they grow, to the point where they're edible. Menakfim and fatmin osam, right? We said we're allowed to pierce them, we're allowed to fatten them with oil. Ad Rosh Hashanah. Only in the 6th year. Ad Rosh Hashanah in V'Shvius Lo. So now you're telling me, and this is against the brisa, that smearing oil on a pruned tree is prohibited during Shvius. And we just said it was permissible. Mi dami, hacha ukmi, ilana v'shari, hasam petume peravi asu. The Bryce is not talking about a case of preserving the tree. You were talking about smearing oil on the figs, the unripened figs. And that allows the process of ripening and fattening the fig. So in that sense, it's prohibited during Shemitah because you're again projecting and strengthening the productivity, fattening up this hag, this unripened fig. But that which we said that you could smear with oil during Shvius, that's a case where you need the oil not to increase the productivity, but simply to maintain the tree. Right, we went through the various Amoraim, and in the first round, Rabbi Bar Yirmiyah had a stira with regard to the smearing of oil. Michti. Hayu kimni v'hayu okme. I don't get it. Smearing the oil on a pruned branch right after the zimur, that's going to preserve the tree. And for that matter, zimur is also meant to preserve the tree. Maishna hai the shari, maishna hai the aser. Why do you tell me that sicha, smearing it with oil, is permissible, but zium is prohibited? And how you dekamale less nagar v'lo nagar the vifike Amrav Yehuda ovdeis kalcham sha'ovdenos of a makel. Right, that there was a common idol worship with a rod. They took a rod and they shook it, mamish like a lulav, shake a lulav, shake your rod in front of your idol. Is then shover makel b'faneh chayv. Apparently, part of the ritual was to break the rod, not just to shake the rod. But Zorak Makil B'faneh, that's already denigrating the idol, and that's hot. So the basic underlying principle here is that you're only chayav for avoda if you do it the normal way it is served. So you have to go back to the study of the idolatry and figure out what's the normal way that the idolaters served the idol. If they shook the rod or broke the rod, that's a normal way of standing in front of this idol and worshiping it. But if he takes the rod and he throws it, no, not like the case of Makolis, which that is the darke, but here it's not darke, then he's pot. Now here I found something pretty amazing. So we're almost finished. He says that you chayav misa for avodas kol chavim in one of two ways. Either if you worship it the normal way it's normally worshipped, or you imitate the way we bring a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, even if that's not the normal way the idolaters would worship. So, for example, in the Beis Hamikdash, we have shchita, we have slaughtering the animal. We also have sreifa, we burn certain things on the Mizbeach. And we have zrikas adam and nisuch hayayin. All of these constitute a chiv misa, capital crime, and if they're done for the sake of avodah zara, whether or not it's kedarka, whether or not it's the normal way that those idolaters will practice their idolatry. Again, above and beyond that which we do in the Beis Hamikdash, then it depends on whether or not it's normal or not normal. And apparently, throwing a rod in front of the Avoda Zara, it cannot be a capital crime because it's not an Avoda in the Mikdash. And it's not Kedarko. It's not the normal way they worship the idol. So what's the difference now between Sheber if he breaks the rod and Zorak if he throws it? Amalei Abayler of Maishno Sheber, Da'avi Kain Zvicha. Because when you shecht an animal, it makes a certain snapping noise. And when you break the rod, it makes that snapping noise. And therefore, you chayiv misa for breaking the rod because it's similar, although an extended similarity, you have to be a little bit creative, to zvicha. Frek the Gemara, Abaye asks Zorak Nami Havile Kein Zrika. Why not find a similarity between throwing the rod and throwing the dam in the Beis Hamikdash? Amalei Rava responds, Be'ina Zrika Mishtaberes Veleka. When the blood is used in the temple service, it's broken down into droplets and thrown towards the Mizbeach. Throwing an object in a service to an idol parallels this act, but only when in the process the object breaks into pieces. Esvei, let's just finish this up. Abaye asks a kasha on Rava. The Brisa says, Sofas lotsoa, mind-boggling. He takes excrement and he, like so to speak, smears it on the mouth of the idol. He says here, Sofas is like yispos, which means to dip. Anyway, he smears the idol, the face of the idol with excrement. Oh, shenisach lefaneha. Ovid shomei raglayim, right? He had a urinal and he pours the urine in front of the idol. Chayim. Right? Normally you would say this is not the way you serve an idol. And yet the Brisa Paschal said he's chayav misa. And the reason is because even though that's not the normal urche of serving the idol, but nevertheless it's similar to the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash. So Gemara says, "Bishlema ovichel meiraglayim ikos riko mishtaberes." Okay, I can see the similarity between, pouring this pot of urine and sort of zrika of the dam, but eletzoa, but to take dung and smear it on the face of the idol, my zrika mishtaberes, how is that in any way similar to the avodah in the mikdash? And Rava answers, "Bitzoa lacha." If it's wet excrement, then it's like throwing fragments onto the idol, as we throw the dam in the Beis Hamikdash, and it becomes broken down and fragmented. Okay, then. So this is where we'll stop here on Daf Nun Aleph, and Mirz Hashem, I guess